Hi everyone. Hey, magandang maulang gabi sa ating lahat. Welcome to Saliksikat webinar where we feature Filipino researchers from different fields to talk about their lives as researchers in the Filipino research community. The webinar is brought to you by Saliksik, a social enterprise that brings research to life. We connect Filipino researchers with the resources they need to succeed, be it funding, networking, or tech transfer assistance. The team aims to promote the importance of research in the development of our country, to humanize and deconstruct the towering images or whatever misconception we might have of researchers, as well as to inspire budding researchers to pursue their field towards creating a better Philippines. It has been a long time since I last delivered that spiel. Matagal-tagal din tayong nawala and it's so good to be back. We're doing this again. While we're at it, if you haven't liked or shared our page or joined our community yet, we encourage you to do so you can stay updated with Saliksi. To you, our dear audience, you will definitely pick some new insights from our guest today. If you have questions, any questions, post them in Slido. The link is in the comment section or flash to you right now. For this week, Saliksik decided to feature a diverse set of people involved not just in scientific research, but also in communicating science. We'll be chatting with a seasoned science communicator, and I have the privilege and honor to introduce him to you. Mikael is a multi awarded science journalist and the editor in chief of Flipscience.ph, a Philippine based science news website. He is the host of Ask Theory, a weekly podcast featuring Filipino scientists, and has written and published books about media literacy, Filipino science, pioneers, and science trivia. These books will be plugged later, complete with a Shopee link. He also conducts lectures and workshops on science communication and writing as well. Here is our guest for tonight, Mr. Mikael Angelo Francisco. Hi, Mikael.
Hello, good evening, everyone, and thank you for that wonderful intro spiel. I'm really excited to share the things I've learned with our audience. Yung mga gustong mag-communicate ng science dyan or mga interested lang sa science, I can't wait to get to share everything I've learned with you guys.
Ayan na nga. Proud ako to say na nagbasa ako ng ilang articles sa Flip Science in the past few days. It's actually an inside joke among the team na medyo nag-stock ako ng Flip Science. And as a writing teacher as well, masasabi ko napakahusay ng ginagawa ni Mikael. Is there
Thank
anyone
you.
you'd like to greet? You're welcome, of course. Is there anyone in the audience you'd like to greet, Mikael, before we start? A
Yeah,
shout out?
una-una yes, una-una sa lahat ng nanonood diyan, I'm sure kasama si mama ko and my wife. Thank you for tuning in. And all of the everyone who has benefited from Flip Science and Ask Theory in some way, whether you've listened to one episode or nagbasa lang kayo ng isang article namin or kahit yung trivia card namin nakita nyo on social media, thank you so much for giving us even just a little bit of your time. All we want to do here at Flip Science is to share that love for science and knowledge with everyone.
Alright. Thank you, Mikael. Shoutout din sa students ko ha. First day of classes kanina, makinig kayo. Marami kayong matututunan dito. Anyway, daming kalokohan. Let's start with the question and answer portion because that's what we read it here. Our first question for you, Mikael. What is the job description of a science communicator?
All right. That's a great first question, and I'm going to just share some slides so that you can get a better sense of the things that I'm talking about. So, for people who have attended my lectures or workshops in the past, some of these concepts might be familiar. I'll try to not to make it redundant or boring, but anyway, just let's continue. So, ano ba ang trabaho ng isang science communicator? And is it special ba? Do you have to be a scientist? Do you have to have a journalism degree? Just to give a bit of background, I am not a scientist. I am also not a journalist. I'm not formally trained as a writer. these are yung skills ba that I just developed over time because when I graduated from college, medyo iba yung track ko. uh, Iba yung dapat magiging professional path ko. But I discovered when I entered the professional world na yung love ko for science as a kid, andun pa rin pala. And yung love ko for writing that I kind of developed over the years, that paved the path towards me sort of making this a career of sorts. Um, pero getting back to the question, ano ba talaga ang ginagawa ng isang science communicator? Nagtuturo ba tayo ng science? Science teachers ba tayo? Well, siguro ang shortest answer ko is we help people appreciate science better. Regardless kung scientist or just a casual person na ay parang cool tong science fact na nabasa ko or someone who is not even interested in science at all. You know, when we write about science or when we talk about science or when we create videos about science, the goal is to just share that understanding and love of science with anyone. Gawing inclusive ba? Gawing mas inclusive ang science. So kung titignan natin yung mga trabaho, quote-unquote, ng isang science communicator, the first thing that, based on my experience, kasi there's really not, technically, wala namang manual or
Wala.
formal job description ang isang science communicator. But from what I've learned through my experiences and the things that I was fortunate enough to accomplish, as a science communicator, first thing we do is, of course, to big surprise, we inform. We write about whether they're breaking developments in science or just science facts that are relevant to people. We help the public to stay informed. Like, for example, back in 2020, kung naalala ninyo, if you haven't been living under a rock for the past 2.5 years, you probably know about this little thing called COVID-19 and how it has totally changed our lives. And if you took a step back and took a look back at 2020, kung maalala nyo sa Philippines, one of the big issues then early on was that merong kakulangan sa mga testing kit. Yung COVID-19 detection was a problem kasi this was a new problem for the rest of the world, and the Philippines was kind of busy playing catch up with other countries who already had the an ample supply of mechanisms in place to help control the spread of COVID-19 by detecting it. So isa sa mga innovations na ni-report ng Flip Science ay yung pag-develop ng Gen Amplify COVID-19 detection kit. Isa itong collaborative effort ng Filipino scientists, and ginagamit nito yung existing equipment na meron na tayo sa certain hospitals natin to be able to uh, to detect COVID-19 at a fraction of the cost, because back then mahal din yung magpa-testing, actually hanggang ngayon. Pero back then this was a real huge problem. So yun nga, yung mga innovators natin dito sa Philippines, they came up with this, and we reported about that. So another thing that science communicators do is we investigate. So we're all familiar with the fact that misinformation, disinformation, and yung tinatawag nating fake news, pero it's not really supposed to be called fake news. Pero yun nga, let's just call it misinformation and disinformation. Yung mga maling facts or maling bagay na tinuturo sa atin na tama daw, whether may malicious intent or hindi. Yan ang isa sa mga bagay na iniimbestigahan ng mga science writer or science communicators. If you recall, nung 2020 rin, a lot of my examples are gonna be pulled from 2020 kasi this was a time when talagang na-apply ko yung mga natutunan ko as a science communicator, and nakita ko in action kung gaano talaga ka-importante yung trabaho ng science journalists, science communicators, science writers. Kung maalala nyo, early on in the pandemic, there was actually a government official who said na one of his tips for preventing COVID-19 infection was magmumog daw ng maligamgam na tubig. And when he was asked kung saan ito galing, sabi niya he read it from a news article. I'm not gonna say kung anong media outlet yung nag-publish ng article, but it was a credible media outlet here in the Philippines. Pero ako, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a scientist, pero medyo skeptical ako kasi when this information is given to you, you have to, hindi naman sobrang i-reject mo or critical ka sobra, pero you have to be critical minded. Kailangan hindi mo siya basta-basta tanggapin. So ako parang, is that really how respiratory illnesses work? Is this really how COVID-19 works? Lalo na wala pa tayong masyadong alam dito sa virus na ito. Bakit parang meron na agad tayong prevention tips? Is this really, and more importantly, kung ganun lang kasimple ang pag-avoid ng COVID-19, magmumubog lang pala ako ng tubig, solved na eh. Eh di bakit napakalaking problema nito? And then I looked for the article na sinabi nung government official, and I found that they attributed that advice to an infectious disease expert in Hong Kong called named Dr. Yuen Kwok Yung. So I did what I felt I should do, and I tried to track down this person's contact number. I found his email. I emailed him point blank. Sabi ko, "Hello, I'm a science writer from the Philippines. I just wanted to verify if you really gave this piece of advice during one of your talks at the university because this article quoted you." So sobrang iksi ng response sa akin sa email. Sabi niya sa akin, fake, especially the throat part. I didn't stop there though. I also talked to two doctors, two Filipino doctors, and they sort of like confirmed na mali nga itong so-called advice na ito. So we published on Flip Science, we published an article debunking this na parang ito, in-interview nga namin si Dr. Yuen Kwok Yung and sabi niya hindi daw to totoo. And then sinama namin yung explanation ng mga doktor na kinausap ko na ganito kasi yan, blah, 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 blah. And then I also took the extra step of emailing the publication that published the article. Na parang sabi ko, hey, I'm just concerned. I talked to the expert that you quoted in your article. He said that he didn't say this. They did not acknowledge my email, but the next day, the article was gone. So ako parang okay lang, hindi niyo in-acknowledge yung email ko, but you're welcome, I guess. It's okay. I mean, the important thing is hindi yung makakabasa nitong maling information na to, matigil na. Wala nang dagdag na magkakamali na magakala na okay lang na hindi ako mag-mask, okay lang na hindi ako mag-ingat, basta magmumug ako ng maligam-gam na tubig because that is very dangerous advice. So, yan, we investigate. Science communicators, science writers, we investigate. Just wanted to clear na yung mga share ko dito is from the perspective of a science writer because primarily I am a science writer. Pero this applies to science communication in general. So next, we demystify. Kung meron tayong mga katanungan, mga bagay na hindi natin naiintindihan, yung science communicator ang nagsistep in para gawing mas madaling intindihin to para sa public. If you remember, nung pumutok ang balita about COVID-19, naging matunog din sa balita yung paniki. Kasi nga ang prevailing theory and where most of the credible evidence still points to is that yung COVID-19 was originally zoonotic in nature. Na yun nga, yung if you remember that story about the wet market, doon nagsimula daw. And just on the side of being careful, I'm not saying that that's 100% true, but all extensive evidence and investigation points to this as the likeliest cause of why we've been in this pandemic for 2 years plus. So kasama doon, nagkaroon ng parang bias against bats. Na parang there were a lot of jokes on social media na parang, ayan, kasi kain ng paniki, ganyan. So, okay, medyo na, sige, sabihin natin na pag nakita tayo ng mga ganong weird na memes, nakakatawa siya. Pero hindi natin na-realize na yung pag-reinforce ng mga ganitong beliefs about animals, about nature, na puro sakit lang naman na makukuha natin dyan, medyo in-oversimplify niya yung talagang relationship between humans and nature and why these things happen to us. So we published an article talking about how exactly these diseases develop in bats. And if you want to know more about it, you can look for the article on Flip Science. Pero basically, yung internal temperature ng bats are high enough so that yung viruses can thrive in their bodies because syempre they generate a lot of heat because they yung activity nila, they fly, etc. But when nalipat yan sa tao and yung temperatures natin ng katawan natin, kayang-kayang i-survive ng mga virus na ito. They can serve, our bodies are not as hostile, parang ganun. So that's why mas madali silang kumalat sa atin and through contact, etc. And this article also went into paano nga ba na-transfer itong sakit na ito sa ano. So yeah, I don't want to spoil it, but if you want to read it, if you want to learn more about it, you can read it. All right. And then we clarify. Did you know that the World Health Organization historically doesn't like to use the word pandemic? Of course, I think that has changed now. Pero back then, parang the word pandemic has sort of like a troubling connotation to it. Like some people misunderstand that when you say pandemic, parang sobrang naging grabe na yung sakit, nakakamatay na, ganyan. And I'm not saying na COVID ay hindi nakakamatay. Alam naman nating lahat ito sa nakaraang 2 taon. Pero yung importanteng maintindihan yung distinction between an epidemic, an outbreak, and a pandemic, and why hindi tayo dapat mag-panic or mawala sa mga isip natin pag narinig natin yung salitang pandemic. So yung article namin about the pandemic, it clarifies the distinction between what an outbreak is, how it becomes classified as an epidemic, how it becomes classified as a pandemic. It is an informal term for the sudden, sustained global transmission of a contagious disease. It does not mean that said disease has become more deadly. Hindi siya signifier na nakamamatay na to. A disease can be deadly from the onset, pero outbreak lang siya kasi nasa small area lang siya. So parang let's not panic. Huwag tayong mawala sa mga sarili natin. Let's understand the problem and let's do what we have to contain the spread and to safeguard ourselves. Yun yung point. So, yun, as science writers, we also clarify. Uh, Next, we persuade. So, hindi naman sa generalize ko, pero palagay ko, and if we're being honest here, before this pandemic, hindi normal sa atin na maghugas ng kamay for 30 seconds or longer. Siyempre, isipin lang natin, babasa ng tubig, sasabon, banlaw. But, yung to be able to properly wash your hands or to really keep your hands clean, you have to uh, do it for a certain period of time. And you have to do it in a proper way. Hindi lang yung maglalagay ka lang ng sabon sa palad mo tapos kukuskusin mo lang ng konti, banlaw na. So this article that we published in March 2020 talked about why we should take a little time, a bit longer to wash our hands. So we persuade. Yan. We inspire. Nung lahat tayo ay nasa bahay lang at wala tayong magawa, well, some of us, yung mga iba sa atin na fortunate enough to have internet access, syempre may sources tayo of entertainment. Pero for a lot of us who na hindi makapasok sa trabaho, hindi makapasok sa school, this was a very life-changing event, and it was not for the better. It was not a good thing kasi our minds were idle, we were getting bored, we were getting antsy, and when people start getting antsy, they become more eager to go out when they're not supposed to, etc., etc. But we decided that maybe if we shared the story of a scientist who, according to his own account, and I'm stressing this because some historians disagree with Sir Isaac Newton's own account of what he did during the years that he spent at home during the Great Plague of London. But he himself said that nung he had to stay home because of the Great Plague, those were his most productive years daw. He conducted a lot of experiments, he had a lot of scientific breakthroughs. He attributes some of his significant scientific discoveries to the experiments that he did during this period. So basically what we're trying to say is whether or depending on how you take it, whether or not sobrang 100% true yung sariling accounts ni Newton, it cannot be denied that he was able to find ways to learn more, to discover more kahit nasa bahay lang siya. So we wanted to inspire people na parang hindi porket nasa bahay lang kayo, wala na kayong gagawin or wala na kayong magagawa. Meron at meron yan. Just stay curious, just keep asking questions, and just try to keep finding answers to those questions. And we move. We don't just write about science. We don't just cover these breaking stories about health, or we don't just clarify things. We can also move people to act. We can argue, of course, na hindi naman to hard science, but ako, kinount ko na to as part of the what a science communicator can do. Because when, nung March 2020, we compiled a list of organizations, individuals who were accepting donations for the families who were affected by COVID-19, whether it's monetary or medical supplies or whatnot. Yung mga may kakayahang tumulong, in-encourage namin na tumulong by publishing this article. And sure enough, a lot of people reached out, even people who were not in the Philippines. They were emailing us and saying, paano ba kami makapag-donate? Ano ba yun? And then we would point them to, tingnan niyo po itong article na ito. They have the contact numbers here, so you can talk to them and ganyan. But, it was really quite an experience for me na, wala akong ginawa. All I did was compile these links. All I did was get these numbers with consent and publish them. And I was able to help. We were able to help in our own small way. So, diba? It's not hard science. We weren't writing about hard science, but we were able to help with the science-related problem, with the health-related problem. And of course, last but not the least, we entertain. A big part of my love for science is the fact that I've always been curious and fascinated by a lot of the things that I don't understand in my environment. Like for example, nung bata ako, I was always wondering, bakit nga ba pag ang pusa nahuhulog, most of the time nalalaglag sila on their feet. Bakit ang tao hindi? Bakit hindi natin natututunan na pag nahulog tayo, nakabalanse tayo like a cat? So, we featured this story noong 2020 during a time when people were very worried about COVID-19. Para naisip namin, okay, baka naman makatulong kung may mga little articles about yung mga distractions ba, na fun science facts. So, I think at that time we were also doing daily trivia, daily science trivia. So, this is one of our featured trivia, yung writing reflex ng pusa. But it doesn't work 100% of the time. And again, if you want to know why it works and why it sometimes doesn't, I invite you to read the article on Flip Science. So, yun, those are the things that a science communicator does.
All right. Thank you, Mikael. I can't help but stay at awe at everything you've just talked about. In fact, I'm writing down notes because that's what I do when I listen to smart people. You take notes so that it stays on your brain. I wanted to summarize the 8 verbs that you mentioned earlier. So, science communication informs, investigates, demystifies, clarifies, persuades, inspires, moves, and entertains. And what I really like about hearing you talk earlier is the fact that everything you do for science communication is action oriented because all of these are verbs. You really want people to move because what I'm getting from your discussion is Flipscience.ph really goes beyond informing people about what it means to implement science research in the Philippines, but also because we all want social change, and social change does not happen without us moving towards it. And I think that's very admirable of you. Actually, ang dami ko pang ibang sinulat, pero kasi it's about you and not my insights, diba? I also like the fact that you mentioned that you don't consider yourself a scientist, you don't consider yourself a journalist and or a writer, which makes Flipscience.ph even more admirable because you were able to marry all of these things and make it such a success story. Parang like it actually segues us very cohesively towards the next question. Kasi kung hindi ka scientist, hindi ka journalist, hindi ka writer, good luck Max, ang galing ng pronunciation ko tonight. And yet here you are with flipscience.ph. So the next logical question that we come up with is, what do you need to become a science communicator?
Right. That's again, I think this night is gonna be full of good questions because that's another good question. Lalo-lalo na sa mga tao dito na maybe they wanna communicate science but they're doubting their own ability. Like, wala naman akong science degree. Hindi naman ako formally trained journalist. Well, in my case, all I really wanted to do was tell stories. Parang ako, that's where it started. So, what does it take to become a science communicator? That is the question that I am sure a lot of people are asking, lalo na yung mga people who wanna go ahead and do it but aren't sure if they have what it takes. And like I said, you just have to want to tell a story. But Mikael, I'm not an expert on science. Paano ko gagawin yun? Well, the fact that you're not an expert on science actually puts you at an advantage. Because if you are an expert, you can be a great science communicator. But if you are a non expert, you can also be a great science communicator because one person has the answers and the other, more importantly perhaps, has the questions. Of course, the expert has the answers kasi nga expert siya sa field niya eh. If he is communicating about microbiology or public health, alam niya na yung mga sasabihin niya kung paano niya ipapaliwanag yung mga bagay-bagay na ginagawa niya sa pang-araw-araw niyang buhay sa trabaho niya. Pero kung isa kang non-expert na kagaya ko, you have all of the things that you don't understand in your head. You have all of the questions. And there is a very good chance that these are the same questions that your audience shares. So if you have all of the questions in your head, you know exactly what to ask the experts when you are talking to them. Kasi hindi mo naman bubunutin sa kung saan lang yung isusulat mo eh. Siyempre, and we will go into that later. Siyempre, you will talk to credible sources. But it's not just about talking to credible sources. It's about not wasting both of your time and effort by asking the right questions, by getting to the heart of what you need to talk about, by getting to the answers that can enrich your message. so that when you deliver it to the public, they can walk away from it a little bit smarter or understanding science a little bit better. So anyone who has seen a Marvel movie, and I'd probably guess that everyone watching this has at least seen one Marvel movie or TV show or superhero piece of superhero fiction on TV or movie. You can tell na may formula for success. If you look at all of the good superhero movies versus the bad superhero movies, you can just compare. This one tells a cohesive story and this is basically what makes it good. Medyo tsaka yung abilities ng bida or medyo manipis yung plot. Maganda yung pagkakakwento niya. Because it really does rely a lot on how you tell the story. So yung act 1 yung setup, yung how you introduce the problem, how you introduce your article or how you introduce your video, for example, yung paano yung intro spiel mo sa video mo, ganyan. Doon pa lang, mako-capture mo na yung attention ng mga audience mo and you can get them to start asking the questions that they want to be answered. And that's how they'll keep watching or keep reading. And then yung act 2, dito sa confrontation siya. So nandiyan na yung lahat ng elements mo. Nagkakakilala na sila, nagsasalpukan na sila. Medyo parang ganun din yan when you're crafting your science story. You take all of the facts because you can't put in everything, otherwise magsusulat ka na ng textbook. But you get the most relevant information, the simplest way to get to the answer, and at the same time making it compelling and interesting para hindi naman makatulog yung nagbabasa or yung nanonood. So, and when you get to Act 3, which is the resolution, yung ending mo, ayan na, by the time that they read the conclusion, nasagot na yung tanong. Whether may definite siyang sagot or ang sagot ay wala pa tayong enough evidence to say so, but the evidence existing likely points to this and that, you have to establish that in your conclusion. You can leave your audience with more questions, make them more curious about the topic, but make sure that the question that you post at the beginning is at least answered in a basic way by the end to make the journey satisfying. So minsan kasi yun nga, pag nanonood tayo ng sine, parang may ini-introduce na mga problems sa plot tapos hindi sila nasagot hanggang ending. So parang feel natin unsatisfied tayo. That's the same when you're communicating a science story. So remember that no matter how many facts or questions you're dealing with, you have to tell a cohesive story. You don't have to be a brilliant writer or a genius journalist to do that. You just have to be committed to telling the story. For example, this story, which is one of my favorites, and I think I talk about this story in every workshop I've given. Nagfi-Facebook lang ako dito. As any wannabe writer would tell you, experts tayo sa procrastination. So, magsusulat ako, tapos ang gagawin mo, mag-Facebook ka lang. So, nag-Facebook ako noon instead of writing like I should be. So, nadaan sa feed ko, may picture ng isang aso na, ito siya, this picture of the dog. I would have ignored it. Cute yung aso, pero parang, it's a dog. But I saw the caption. It said, Manila Spaniel. So, parang, I've never heard of this breed of dog before. Why is it called the Manila Spaniel? And double L pa siya, Manila Spaniel. Bakit ganon? I looked at the page, sabi ko baka fake, na naman to, fake page lang to, nagpapaklout lang. Pero hindi, legit page siya and it's about purebred dogs. So I sent a message to the Facebook page and said, hi, I'm interested in learning more about the Manila Spaniel because the information that you provided in the photo was just a bit short. So can you tell me more about this? And if you have any references you can share. They said wala daw. They said that they only referred to one magazine where they saw the picture and that's it. So ako parang, there is a science mystery here. Meron nga ba talagang ganitong aso? Tapos ginugel ko. Wala siyang Wikipedia page. Pero meron siyang Wikipedia page, I think in Japanese Wikipedia page. Wala siyang English Wikipedia page, pero meron siyang Wikipedia page in 2 other languages. So ako parang, this is getting stranger and stranger. Long story short, I was able to track down the author of the book that had the most comprehensive information about this dog. And he's a 92-year-old. At the time, he was a 92-year-old author living in Ireland. I wasn't sure he would respond to my email, but he did. So parang, ayan, I got some information from him. He was really, parang sabi nga niya, alam mo, nalungkot nga ako na nawala tong dog na to. Parang maybe you could write a story about it nga and then maybe you could promote, get more people interested in learning more about this breed. And then I did more digging and I saw some references in very old books, 19th century books, mga Spanish era books na may references to the Manila Spaniel. They didn't call it the Manila Spaniel, but they described the dog and this was it. And then I even saw some classified ads in Australian newspapers that were advertising Manila Spaniel. So ako parang okay, talagang meron nga Manila Spaniel ng panahon na yun. Pero bakit wala na ngayon? So I talked to a veterinarian and an expert on culture, and these experts also gave me some very comprehensive answers, their own thoughts. So if you want to know the story, eto na naman, nag-tease na naman ako. If you want to know the story, you can look for this story on Flipscience, the Manila Spaniel, the Pinoy dog breed you've never heard of. I promise you it won't be a waste of your time because I was really thankful that I saw this picture of the dog on my feed kasi it kicked off a lot of things. Yun na lang. So, yun.
Double F. Ngayon, paulit-ulit na sa utak ko, Manila, Manila, Manila. But in a good way, of course, kasi ang galing mong sumegoy sa articles na Flip Science. Natatawa ako. It's just amazing. But really,
I used to
yeah,
be a
sige.
marketer.
Oh, that's why. Parang perfect lang na yung marketing skills mo. It just fits so well with Flipscience.ph. Anyway,
Yeah.
going back to a summary of what you just discussed earlier, I highlighted two things here. Like, ang dami ko notes talaga, bida-bida ako today. What I noticed is that you highlighted the words expert and non-expert, and then you flashed a very attractive picture of Sherlock and Watson there. And in my head, like, okay, so what I'm getting here is that you can't really do things on your own. So yes, there is commitment, but you also have to realize na baka whatever goal you might have in mind, hindi pa kayang mag-isa. So I highlighted here the word collaboration. So there's always like partnerships involved, group work involved and all. Syempre, ang naisip ko dito, I went to your about page and ang dami yung experts behind Flip Science. And I'm like, oh, this is a really good, well-balanced team. That was the thought I had in mind. And then you mentioned commitment. And the first thought I had in my head is, kung may gusto, may paraan talaga. And one of the ways in which you achieve something is really to collaborate there. So other than the Manila Spaniel, natutunan natin ang commitment at ang collaboration there. And I love the way that you presented the three acts there earlier on. And then, syempre, I teach literature, so parang, that's something I can teach my students too. So anyway, I wanted to mention the pagkakakwento, the packaging involved in trying to get people to understand important information that if it's not packaged well, they may not even care about it. Hindi nila papansinin yon at all. O nga naman, aanhin nila ang bagay na hindi nila naiintindihan. They're just gonna go back to the way things are, status quo in their lives. And move on with their lives. And paano tayo? So, ito na naman, ang ganda ng segue nung ni Manila Spaniel to the next question here. We mentioned pagkakakwento, we mentioned packaging, and we mentioned commitment as well. So, other than like a genuine passion and commitment to deliver the language of science successfully to laymen, what are the available platforms for communicating science successfully?
Right. Kanina nabanggit ko nga na yung si Manila Spaniel, 'yan. Ang pangalan ng dog ay si Archer, no? And nakilala ko lang si Archer dahil nakita ko siya habang nagsasayang ako ng oras sa Facebook. So, that is a hint na you can communicate science on social media. Pwede ka mag-communicate ng science through Facebook or Twitter. But there are, in this age of multimedia and even cross-media platforms, marami tayong pwedeng paraan to communicate science. If you're not confident in your writing skills, you don't have to write. If you think you are not photogenic, you don't have to be on camera. But you can play to your strengths. Ang pinaka-importante niyan is yung core ng message mo ay malinaw sa'yo and you research your stuff well. But there are multiple platforms for communicating science. Okay, so one of them is, of course, television. Video or digital television. Familiar tayo dyan. Marami tayong mga TV shows na about nature, mga documentary, ganyan. Alam natin yan. And also, marami mga YouTube channels, mga videos that you can watch about science. They're not, and they don't communicate science in a very photosynthesis is the process of ganyan, ganyan, ganyan. Hindi naman sila ganun mag-communicate na science. Pero they tell stories. They give relatable examples. They answer questions. So, makita natin yung production value helps enhance the storytelling sa mga ganung platforms. And being a visual on audiovisual medium, it helps the content to be more comprehensive and memorable. Yan. Also, aside from video or digital television, we have webcasting or streaming exactly like we are doing right now. Wala namang, I think this doesn't require any further elaboration. um, and podcasting. I am the host of the Ask Theory podcast. It is a weekly podcast that features one Filipino scientist every week. And they are in the spotlight. They talk about what they do. In simple terms, they talk about why they fell in love with science and how they pursued a scientific career. And also they give tips for aspiring scientists. Ano ba yung aasahan mo pag pumunta ka na sa field? Ano ba yung aasahan mo pag meron bang trabaho nag-aantay sa'yo pag graduate ka ng physics? And also they answer some everyday questions like bakit parang ang weird ng panahon sa Pilipinas? Totoo ba na lulubog ang ilang bahagi ng Pilipinas by 2050? Um, Paano ba nabubuo ang makapuno? Paano ba tayo nagkakaroon ng makapuno? So all of these curiosities, sinasagot nila yan through the podcast. So if you're not comfortable showing your face on camera, but you want to talk to people, you're confident in your ability to deliver lines and to interview people, podcasting might be the best option for you. Or, pwede ring vidcasting. Kung medyo confident ka mag-video, yan, vidcasting. Of course, blogs. Technically, Flipscience.ph is a blog. It's an online uh, it's an online journal where we publish articles about science. But you can set up your own science blog, science related blog. If you're a microbiologist who wants to talk about all of the crazy things that you discover when you look through the microscope, you can just put a blog and just talk about maybe share some pictures, add some descriptions, maybe make some references to pop culture. Oy, napanood ko yung ganyan and it reminded me of something I saw under the microscope. Ganyan. Something as simple and mundane as that can tickle the curiosity of the average non-science expert. Webcomics, yan. I drew this webcomic couple of years ago. And I think I know, sorry, last year lang nga ata to. And then it was about Maya too, and I was trying to be funny about it, but also trying to illustrate na yung kaya siya pinangalan ng Maya 2. This is a cube satellite na gawang Pinoy, and this was sent to space. Pero kaya siya Maya 2 kasi yung size niya kasing liit lang nung Maya. Which is, by the way, yung alam nating Maya, yung mga maliliit na brown na ibon, those are Eurasian tree sparrows. Hindi sila yung totoong Maya. So naging parang Maya na lang sila, sobrang common. Pero yung talagang Maya, it's called the chestnut munia. And yun yung talagang former national bird natin. Not the brown birds that are common in everywhere we go. So yun, just a little bit of trivia. Yeah. Email, of course, if you want to create a weekly email newsletter, sharing the latest science headlines, yan, pwede yan. Or communicating new innovations from your laboratory to your stakeholders, yan, you can communicate science through email. Augmented reality, marami mga apps sa phone na pwedeng nag-identify ng, actually marami tayo na sa Pilipinas nag-identify ng insects, nag-identify ng crops, nag-identify ng pests. Using the power of augmented reality through handheld devices such as phones, we can communicate science. Users can learn about science. Virtual reality. There was a time when I was working on a VR game, pero hindi siya natuloy. It didn't push through. Pero at one point, I was working with a team who were going to make a virtual reality game that's related to science. So, pwede ring gawing a platform for science communication and virtual reality if you're into coding stuff for that. You can like create interactive these full environments, yung mga top tipong VR experience, no? The limits are constrained to your imagination. Ano yung pwede mong gawin dun sa platform? So if you have a vision for something that might work as a virtual reality or simulation or something, and it's related to science and you want to communicate science through it, like siguro pag sinuot mo tong na to, and then you booted this up, you can see animals in a forest, or ano ba yung itsura ng Philippine forest? Ano ba yung mga animals na nasa Philippine forest? Kung medyo masipag-sipag ka, pwede kang gumawa ng ganong experience, VR experience. So that's another way of communicating science. And of course, last but not least, social media, which is where Flip Science regularly posts trivia or shares our articles or shares other articles about science from other publishers. So yun.
All right. I mean, if you think about it, if anyone wants to deliver a message to the world, I mean, even if it's science related or not, wala silang excuse kasi ang daming choices available and you just have to use it intelligently, I would suppose. So it's not disinformation or misinformation you share to the world. And it's really helpful that you laid down all of these available options to our listeners here. Wala tayong excuse para hindi makaintindi ng bagay-bagay sa world because we all have these things. We all have our resources, we all have our options, not only to share, to consume, but also just simply to know what's happening in our day-to-day lives. So far we've mentioned what the job description is of a science communicator, what you need to become one, and what are the platforms. The next logical question in our outline here is I actually added a follow-up question. What can you accomplish with science communication? And then I added here, what is the dream of a science communicator in the Philippines?
Ganda. Ang ganda nung question na yun. So, una-una, what can you accomplish with science communication? Balikan natin yung mga kaninang, the different tasks of a science communicator. So, yun nga, to inform, to entertain, ganyan, marami tayong pwedeng magawa, yung gusto nating gawin. Ako, I like that you asked about the dream kasi I can share my dream as a science communicator. I within my lifetime, yan, sabihin natin, within my lifetime, I would like to see a Philippines that makes decisions predominantly based on science and logic. Napaka parang ang simplistic and maybe naive nung dream ko, pero that's what pushes me to do this. This isn't my Flip Science exists because my wife is my co-founder, and basically Flip Science owes half of its existence to my wife, and it's half to me. So lagi co-founders kami. So when people say that I'm the founder of Flip Science, I tell them no, I'm not the founder. I'm the co-founder. Flip Science would not exist. Actually, Flip Science was my wife's idea. I simply just implemented. We brainstormed it kasi parang just to give you a bit of my history, naubos yung time natin sa mga kwento kong ganito, pero just a bit of my history. I used to write articles for GMA News about science, but napansin ko na konti lang yung mga nagsusulat noon about science sa Philippine media landscape. So parang bakit wala tayong sarili nating IFL Science? Wala tayong sarili nating Live Science. Wala tayong sarili nating Science Daily. All of these science news websites from the United States, from other countries, even Norway has its own science news website. Bakit tayo parang wala? Because I tried to search on Google, wala talaga. So my wife said, okay, kung yan yung problema, why don't we make one? We don't have funding. We don't have, we're not gonna run this like a business, but we do have a writer, and that's you. And anyone else who wants to write and who believes in the same mission. So Flipscience.ph exists because we believe that it has to exist. It's not earning money. It's a passion project. Even the Ask Theory podcast is not funded. It's a passion project. It's out of pocket yung expenses. But I'm not sharing that to complain. I'm giving you the reality of the situation, which is these platforms exist because we want to reach that dream na balang araw, whether it's purchasing decisions or our government officials investing in certain projects, where if they have to decide if they want to use their funds for better healthcare and disaster response, or if they want to beautify a beach with artificial sand, yung mga ganyang desisyon, sana sa balang araw, magawa siya with science and logic at the forefront. Siyempre may empathy, hindi naman cold science lang na hindi natin iisipin yung impact sa tao na ano. Like, because these decisions, masyadong simplistic na i-assume na walang butterfly effect itong mga decision na to. But we have to base yung pag-implement natin ng rules or pag-decide na paggawa natin ng desisyon sa ebidensya. Yun naman lang ang gusto kong sabihin. So I want to give you some examples of what a science communicator can accomplish. Um, Sorry, medyo again. Okay. So what can you accomplish with good science communications? I'll give you 3 examples lang. I'll try to keep it short. So yung una, I worked on the golden rice FAQs for Erie. I sort of helped them, let's say, repackage or rewrite their FAQs to make it more accessible to the general public who wants to learn more about golden rice. So may I to in order to do that, I prepared a list of objectives. Sabi ko, ano ba yung gusto niyong ma-accomplish natin dito? I don't want to just rewrite this. Kailangan malinaw sa akin kung bakit. Kasi syempre, goal-driven yung pag-communicate mo dapat ng science. So I wrote down their objectives based on what they told me and kung sino yung target audience. And then I assessed their existing FAQs. I gave points for improvement. And then I also listed down the chief objections to golden rice. Ano-ano ba yung mga problema ng valid concerns ng mga tao about golden rice? And masasagot ba natin ito sa FAQs na yun? So I did my best to answer all of the questions and communicate the science in a way that makes it simple for a non-expert to understand. And so yan na yung naging revised golden rice FAQ. So if you go to the website of Erie, you'll find the golden rice FAQs uploaded there. So may mga yan na. So if you want to check it out later after this webinar, especially if you have reservations about golden rice. And it's not that I'm promoting golden rice or being the biggest supporter of golden rice. I'm not trying to dump this on you. I'm just saying that if you have questions about golden rice, please read the FAQs and maybe some of your concerns will be addressed. Maybe some of your concerns will be validated. But most importantly, you will not be basing your decisions on guesswork. You will have the answers here, and I can tell you that these are true because I verified what I wrote here. So ito, number 2. Siguro naalala niyo to noong 2019, sabi ni Senator Cynthia Villar, in a hearing that was related to the allocation of agriculture budget. Sabi niya, parang lahat ng inyong budget puro research. Baliw na baliw kayo sa research. This even became a meme of sorts. Aanhin niyo ba yung research? Now, I just want to clarify na what Senator Villar was saying here was that kailangan yung research mag-translate into products, which is valid. Ang naiintindihan ko naman, tama naman yun. You don't just research things, you also have to consider how they can be transformed into things that can benefit the people. I'm not now kailangan klaro, not all research translates into products automatically. As any researcher will tell you, hindi yan nag-research ako, so therefore I can invent the cure for cancer. Hindi ganun yun. The best innovations in our time are built upon research, which is built upon research, which is built upon research. So this is a multi-step process. And if we take away one of those steps, we might be missing out on that crucial step that can take our civilization further. So it's important to fund research. And yun nga, babalikan natin yung sinabi ni Senator Villar na parang, oo, well-meaning yung gusto niyang sabihin, pero pangit ng pagkakasabi. Parang sinasabi nga na sobra kayo mag-research, baliw na baliw kayo sa research. Hindi dapat ganun ang pag-address natin ng concerns about research translating into products, into output. So nag-isip ako, research, baliw na baliw sa research, agriculture, parang may familiar na story dyan sa akin. And it's as it turns out, that same year in January, I wrote a story about Dr. Ricardo Lantican, who with his colleagues researched a disease called southern corn blight in UP Los Baños. So long story short, they were ahead of their time kasi this southern corn blight, a decade later, naging malaking problema siya sa US. They lost about $2 billion worth of their crops because they didn't pay attention to it. Pero a decade earlier, meron na agad research sila Dr. Lantican about it. And verified ito because I talked to him about it. I read his books, his paper about it. I read some books about him talking about it. And so I told the story of how, these researchers who were crazy about research, they were able to contribute knowledge that could stop a massive global corn crisis. Hindi ko inasahan na ang daming na mag-a-appeal to sa napakaraming tao. And I think a few days lang ang daming reactions, ang daming shares. And not only that, naging laman siya ng headlines sa iba't ibang publications, which I totally did not expect. Some of them even interviewed me. Parang ako, bakit niyo ako interviewin? Interviewin niyo si Dr. Lantican. Wala naman ako alam dyan. I'm only the messenger. Pero point is, all I did was tell a story and not to brag, but I was able to contribute or maybe even start a bigger discussion. I'm not saying na sobrang importante ko, But I am saying na yung ginawa ko, yung kinontribute ko, masasabi kong nakatulong. And to me, at the end of the day, I don't need your recognition. I don't need you to tell me I'm so awesome. I just need you to listen to what I am saying, not automatically believe it. Just read it, listen, make your own decisions based on the evidence. And if you're in a position to do something better, if you're in a position to change things, please do something. So natuwa ako dito sa development na to dahil yun nga, these mainstream media, because Flip Science is definitely not mainstream media. We're unfunded, we're small, few people have heard of us. Pero ito, na-elevate yung discussion to a wider audience. And medyo napansin ko dito sa ibang articles na to, nag-critique na rin eh. Yung iba medyo na-exaggerate ng konti yung pagkakakwento. Parang ako, wala na akong magagawa dyan. Medyo hindi swak yung interpretation nyo doon sa kwento ko. But point is, at least, you were able to take that statement, yung baliw na baliw, and hindi lang siya meme na entertainment lang, na-highlight yung importansya ng research. So maybe next time, wala nang magtatanong, bakit kayo research ng research? Bakit kayo baliw na baliw sa research? Kasi kung walang research, walang produkto. Kung walang produkto na galing sa research, walang improvement. Walang technology. And last but not the least, few years ago, nag-survey si Senator Bam Aquino sa kanyang Facebook page. Panahon na ba para sa sarili nating space agency? This was before PhilSA was formally established. So dito sa Facebook survey niya na to, daming nag-react. Parang sabi niya, did you just send that old air conditioner into orbit? Tapos marami pang iba, yung parang sabi, yan, pakulo lang yan para kumurakot ng bilyong piso. And na-trigger ako. Medyo wala akong ginagawa ng gabi yun. Sabi ko, makabanat nga. And nagkataon, we not only published an article about Diwata 1, but I also wrote an article for GMA about the Space Act and the Space Agency. I think this was 2 years before this post. So sabi ko doon sa isa yung pinadala tong air conditioner into orbit, sabi ko hindi naman lahat ng bagay maaaring husgahan sa panlabas na anyo lang. And then I linked to my article, to the Flip Science article. Sorry, I didn't write this, but we published this. And then ito, yung bagong pakulo lang yan para kumurakot ng bilyong piso. Sabi ko, actually hindi. Kasi pag nag-invest tayo sa space science, mas makakatipid tayo. Because prior to the establishment of PhilSA, and I think to a certain extent hanggang ngayon, we still buy data from foreign sources. And a big part of that, yung expenses natin napupunta doon. And that's important kasi a lot of the things that we are reliant on depends on foreign data. But if we have our own capacity to generate data here, makakatipid tayo actually. And I interviewed Dr. Romar Sese, a Pinoy astrophysicist who was basically the one of the primary moving forces behind the Space Act. And he gave me a rundown of bakit importante magkaroon ng sariling National Space Agency ng Pilipinas. So yun, akala ko parang hanggang dyan na lang, okay, sige, pumatol ako sa mga Facebook posts, sa mga Facebook comments. And then may nagsabi sa akin, actually si Dr. Cese, sabi niya, Mikael, napanood mo ba sa news yung sponsorship speech ni Senator Bam Aquino for the PhilSA? This was, I think, during the third and final reading of the Space Act, which was yung bago siya maipasa talaga and ma-establish yung space agency. And I said, no. Bakit? Check mo. And then tinignan ko yung transcript, tapos nagulat ako. Tapos, nag-special mention pala ako, dun sabi niya, pero natuwa ako sa sagot ng isang Mikael Francisco. Sinagot po niya ito sa ating social media platform. Tapos yan, natuwa ako na hindi pa nawawalan ng pag-asa ang iilan nating kababayan sa paghahanap ng solusyon sa mga problema nating bansa. Like I said, hindi ko to ginagawa para magpapansin. This was totally unexpected. But I'm highlighting this to show you guys na kahit gaano kaliit yung SciComm efforts nyo, kahit sumagot lang kayo ng comment sa social media, hindi nyo alam kung meron kayong matutulungan. Hindi nyo alam kung merong makakapansin na decision maker who can take your words or take your comments and infuse them into their own. And together, maybe you can help propel the Philippines forward.
Ang masasabi ko, Mikael, ang tiyaga mong sumagot sa mga taong hindi nakakaintindi. Na-amaze ako. Like, wow. And the way you answered, you actually targeted that person's language. I'm like, precisely why you're doing Flipscience.ph. Like, my God, the patience you have. I'm a teacher, but the patience you have is amazing. Parang God tier kang pumapatong sa ganyan. And you got featured for it. You mentioned it's not your intention. But whatever well-meaning intention you may have, it translated well. Napansin ka ni Bam Aquino. a powerful person at that. It's really amazing. And every time you respond, mas lalo lang ako na-amaze actually. Nakalimutan ko magsulat kasi nakikinig talaga ako sa'yo. Now, I wanted to mention as well, si Hannah is your wife, right?
Yes, hi Abelio.
Yeah. So, of course, I went to your about page while you were talking about her, and I can't help but be entertained by your better half, in which she said that she makes sure that the site's features function properly, and that the ridiculously forgetful editor in chief doesn't get himself locked out of the site for the nth time. Now, I just wanted to say that how fun the people behind Flipscience.ph is, because the first time I read that, tawa ko na tawa 2 days ago, and I'm reading it again while you were talking about her. I mean, it's such a fun and wholesome relationship you have. Ay, Hannah, nafo-fangirl na rin kasi ako. Salamat at pinahiram mo sa amin si Mikael tonight. And I just want to say that, kasi iniisip ko talaga yung students ko while listening to you. If you ever have job openings, ilalako ko talaga sa mga estudyante ko. Whatever failures I have of teaching writing, you can learn it all from Hannah and Mikael. So it's just amazing the case studies you presented there. Okay, okay, so nautusan ako direct na bago mag-move on sa next question, mag-shout out muna tayo. Just to say hello to our audience here. Alexis Verlucas Penamo from Mindanao. Hello, Alexis. I like your thumbnail there. It's a cat. Jester De Torres watching from Batangas. Uy, kamusta Batangas? Muulan din ba dyan katulad dito? Si Jill Manapat watching from Rizal. Hey, Jill. Hi, Erwin. Watching from QC. Parang kilala ko tong mga to. Charles Michael Nakar. It's quite nice to put a face on that voice. Hello, Mikael. Like it's your friend. Ruben John Abalayan watching from Capiz. Hey! Makahello naman ako no? Okay, I think that's the end. Thank you, Direk. Okay. Dahil ako napagbigyan ng pagkakataong mag-host, I'm gonna be a little bit selfish and ask a question that
Mm.
came from me and that's not written on the outline. Just a bit of a background. My training is in linguistics. So while I was reading your articles on Flip Science, I was very, very impressed by the way you use code switching. So may English, may Tagalog, tapos pag binabasa ko yung purely Tagalog, naiintindihan ko pa rin even if I'm a better communicator in English. And so my thinking here is, does flipscience.ph have any plans of integrating other Philippine languages in the writing of your articles?
Yes. Someday, the goal is
Cool.
to grow the
Cool.
platform, grow Flip Science into, so hopefully someday, a legitimate, like registered, talagang formal, everyday may update, may regular roster of writers na science website for Filipinos in different languages. And thank you for noticing yung sa code switching and the fact that we've also started translating some of our articles in Tagalog. It's not an easy effort kasi nga we're understaffed. Actually, the only regular staff namin ay ako at saka si Hannah. But yun, point is we do have that in the cards. We do have that plans for that in the future, and hopefully we're doing our best to grow, to do the necessary, to prepare whatever is necessary to be able to do that. Hopefully soon.
That's so cool. Nai-imagine ko the fandom you'll be creating once you write in Kapampangan, in Bisaya, in Hiligaynon, in Ilocano, all the major languages in the Philippines. Nai-imagine ko na magwawala yung mga friends ko linguists kasi, there's someone using our languages to deliver the messages of science. It's just gonna be fantastic. Balik ulit tayo sa listed questions natin here. What are the elements of good science communication, Mikael?
Aha. Yan. Every time I give a lecture or a talk or a workshop, binibida ko lagi itong inimbento kong, again, hindi ito binase sa guidebook. So, I'm not saying this is gospel truth, but based on my experiences, ito yung kailangan ng isang mahusay na science article or science communication product or science communicator. And ginawa ko siyang mnemonic, acronym, it's science. Yan. So, napakadaling tandaan. Kailangan yung significance nandun. ano ba yung so what? What is the so what? Ano yung point nitong article na to? If you're gonna write about a newly discovered species, why would the audience care? I mean, I can answer that. I mean, sa akin, any new species can tickle the curiosity naman of ano. Pero if you highlight like what makes that species so different, or for example, if you write about how a certain species of mouse that was thought to be extinct was rediscovered in Mount Pinatubo. And significant ito dahil nalaman nila na disaster specialist pala yung species na yun. Meaning it thrives in an environment na nasa lanta, kaya niya mag-adapt. So what the implications for other species, for other biodiversity, marami kang pwede matutunan from that case study. So malinaw yung significance niya. So when you write a science article, kailangan malinaw sa nagbabasa. Why would I spend 5 minutes reading this? What can I take away from this? And syempre, to make yung significance clear, the article of course has to have clarity. Kailangan yung language simple. Kung mag-introduce ka ng jargon, ipapaliwanag mo and only when necessary. Take note, of course, that if you're communicating to fellow scientists naman who are also experts in the vernacular of your field or yung language na ginagamit nyo or yung words nyo, syempre hindi mo masyadong problemahin yung paggamit ng jargon. So hindi naman never use jargon. Pero if you're writing for a general audience, you introduce that unfamiliar word and you define it. You don't just drop it casually and expect the audience to understand. And then try as much as you can to avoid grammatical errors, have someone read your work. Syempre kasi sometimes it takes away from the experience if you pag may nadobling salita ganyan. And ako I admit minsan may nalulusutan pa rin ako noon kasi I'm only human. Sometimes I just miss these things. Pero I'm always grateful when someone points it out and then I edit the article and I fix it. So kailangan clear yung language, very accessible, and of course yun nga sabi mo nga kanina yung whether it's in Tagalog or Bisaya or English, depende sa kung sa audience mo na gusto mong ma-reach, kailangan babagayan mo yun. And then yung inquisitiveness. Nabanggit ko nga kanina yung asking the right questions. If you're a non-expert, you have all of the questions. So there has to be an element of inquisitiveness in your science communication output. Exactitude. Simply, it's you get the facts right, and you get the facts right now. Huwag ka magsulat ng half-baked article na incomplete yung facts and hindi mo na fact-check. Of course, I'm not saying na kailangan sobrang perfect na ng lahat ng elements. Sometimes talagang pag may deadline ka or if current research doesn't 100% support the conclusion, wala ka talagang choice kundi sabihin na there isn't enough evidence but it's the likeliest scenario. Halimbawa, ganyan. So, but it's important na you can get all of the facts that you need for your article. You get them right, you get them correctly, and you get them now. You don't write your article and then just hope na mag-addendum ka na lang na oo nga pala nakalimutan ko, ito nga pala. But no, you have to approach it in a timely manner, getting the information. And then novelty, maraming platform. You don't just have to write. You can make videos, you can make podcasts, you can take pictures, post on Instagram, make a science Instagram account, and just post some pictures with some captions. This is a favorite science Instagrammers ko si Dr. Aimee Lindupo. She's an entomologist and she posts pictures on her IG of beautiful insects and arachnids. And she talks about yung mga special characteristics ito in a very casual and light manner. Parang nagkukwento lang siya. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, hanapin niyo si Dr. Aimee Lindupo sa Instagram and you'll be amazed by her posts of these tiny creatures. And then syempre credibility. Mag-interview ka ng experts na katiwa-tiwala, na expert naman talaga sa field nila. Hindi yung sasabihin sa'yo na to cure cancer, magbalot ka ng repolyo sa katawan mo. That's part of your job as a science communicator is to make sure you're talking to the right people. Di ba? Hindi naman natin minamaliit yung mga taong hindi expert. Like I keep saying again and again, I'm not an expert. But because I have I have that recognition that I'm not an expert, that there's so much for me to learn, and that I have so many questions to ask. I ask the questions to the right people, to the people that I know can give me the right answers, or at least answers that I can trust. And then, of course, empathy. It is very easy for us to laugh at flat earthers or get mad at anti-vaxxers. And I admit, for a time, I was really mad at anti-vaxxers. I think I had a terrible experience with people who flooded the page with anti-vax comments, and it was just horrible. I was replying to them with facts, but someone called me a shill for big pharma. Ako parang I wish, parang this is stuff I do for free. Parang I wish someone would throw some shekels my way. And then someone said, pupunta ako sa impyerno dahil i-advocate ko yung pag-modify ng katawan ng tao na hindi sang-ayon sa kagustuhan ng Diyos. Basta ang dami. Tapos may isa pang sinabi, uto-utong ginipig daw ako. Basta I got a lot of horrible things. And it's very easy to react with rage, with hatred. But when you're dealing with these people, if you call them stupid or if you get mad at them, you're not going to convince them. You're not likely to break into those hard shells. In fact, what you're probably going to do is to reinforce their beliefs, make them retreat further into their shells, into their comfortable circles, where instead of asking questions, they just take everything at face value, and you're not gonna reach anyone. So what I try to do with my limited but big supply of patience, I try at least, is to just present the facts in a way that I think reaches them, yung whether the way they talk. Siyempre hindi mo mamumurahin, pero kung nagtatagalog, huwag mong Englishin. I mean, wag mo namang anahin. Tapos wag ka mong pakitaan na napakatalino ko maniwala ka sa akin. Just show them the evidence, present it in a relatable way, kwentuhan mo, and then just leave them to read and change their minds perhaps. That exchange with some of the commenters on that space agency survey dun sa ano ni Senator Bam, I actually was able to convince a few who actually said in the comments na parang thank you for sharing those links. Binasa ko and tama ka nga. And one of them was actually became more interested in it. Parang sabi nga niya, i-follow ko yung ano ng sa Space Act developments ng Space Act kasi binasa niya. Tapos oo nga, ito nga yung benefits pala pag nagkaroon tayo ng sariling space agency. So have some empathy. Don't just don't just communicate science for the sake of dumping these facts on people and expecting them to just take it in. Hindi lahat ng we all have our different parang approaches and styles of learning. Hindi pwedeng itulak lang sa atin tong facts na to na subuan ka lang and then expect that everyone would accept it. And if hindi talaga maniwala sa'yo, you've done your part, maybe it's time to just walk away. Maybe you're not the right science communicator who can convince these people, but it doesn't mean that you should give up. Maybe you should just try a different tactic or try a different audience.
I'll repeat that again, the entire acronym that you presented to us. Ito, nag-notes na ako pero hindi ko na nakalimutan. So the acronym we have is SCIENCE, which stands for Significance, Clarity, Inquisitiveness, Exactitude, Novelty, Credibility, and Empathy. Oh, it's flashed on the screen. Thank you. I wanted to highlight the discussion you made about the last one, which is empathy. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think empathy is the most important. This is considering the current social political situation of the Philippines we have today. When you mentioned na it's easy to be angry, it's easy to be upset with flat earthers. And when we manifest such anger on social media, we actually push them further into their shells because we're not using the language that's accessible to them. And that comment you made there particularly struck me. Kasi again, kasi inggit ako sa pasensyang meron ka. And that's not something everyone has. And then you realize na, when you have access to quality education like you and I, we know what science is. We know how to communicate in highly technical jargon. We know how to go down to the level of those who may not have the same access as we do. It gives us the reality, the realization na grabe ang responsibility nating edukado, or I don't know, whatever you want to call us.
Yung
We just
fortunate,
know more.
tayong
The
fortunate na
fortunate,
may
there you go.
access to these materials.
Yeah, the privileged ones. It's really us who need to adjust because we have to accept the fact that there are more people out there who may not be as I don't know, well versed in communicating science as we are, and it's really science communicators' jobs to bridge the gap between that makes us different from each other.
Yeah.
And
And
then, yeah,
I
go
just
ahead,
want to
go
add,
ahead.
sorry. And also I want people to realize na itong mga taong to na naniniwala sa random cures for cancer.
Mm,
Kumain ka lang ng gulay, wala ng cancer. Or wag kang magpabakuna dahil mamamatay ka dyan. Or ang mundo ay flat at niloloko lang tayo ng mga scientists, hindi nila ginugusto, hindi karamihan sa kanila, unlike yung mga malicious na trolls lang talaga. Pero majority of these people, hindi nila man nila ginugusto na maniwala dito sa mga bagay nito. Kailangan nating, tama ka na, i-check yung privilege natin na these people believe these things presented as reality because these are the materials that they've had access to,
Yeah.
because these are what the people around them have been telling them. These are based on their own experiences that may have been affected by the circumstances of their lives, and more importantly yung socio-political aspects of life. The fact that not everyone has access to quality education, the fact that not everyone even has a livable wage, these are all problems. These are all connected. Kaya on a slightly related note, you cannot talk about science without talking about politics. And I don't mean politics as in
Mm.
dilaw versus pula
Yeah,
versus
yeah, yeah.
pink. What I mean
It's,
is yung the social aspects, the need for competent leadership, the need for rational decision making. Hindi natin pwedeng tulugan lang ito at pag-usapan lang natin ang mga paniki at mga ibon at mga bakit ganito, bakit ganyan, bakit ang mga pusa ay ano. We talk about those things, but we also have to face the realities na yung mga reclamation projects, ano ba ang nagiging impact nito sa lipunan? Yung patuloy na deforestation, ano ba yung talagang sanhi nito? Bakit ba may yung mga taong nakatira ba dito sa areas na to, aware, wala ba talaga silang kaalaman? O napipilitan lang sila dahil sa sitwasyon ng buhay nila? At bakit ganun ang sitwasyon ng buhay nila? Bakit sila naghihirap? So when we get to the roots of those problems, we can really make big changes. But that starts with sharing information that we have access to.
yep. This is basically working towards social change using the means and resources available to us. What I'm seeing is Flipscience.ph is really like a grassroots level. Like you started it out of your own desire to communicate successfully whatever science has to offer to the Filipino people. But you mentioned the social aspect of science. You mentioned politics as well. Then you realize the goal of social change is really multisectoral. A science communicator can only do so much. What you are doing as a science communicator is amazing, it's inspiring, it's motivational. But at some point, we also have to accept the fact that the grassroots may not be enough considering the gargantuan Herculean task of making the Philippines a better place. At some point, the government has to help as well. So, I mean, I've said it in previous webinars as well. Fund scientists. Okay. So, I'm not looking at the audience. I'm looking at people na dapat paringgan talaga. Fund scientists. Because hindi naman lahat tayo hindi naman tayo blessed with more than the minimum living wage, 'di ba? Kailangan na rin ng tulong galing sa taas. Okay, meron akong directive from our director. Okay, I think we need to do shout outs first before we move on to the next question. Watching from Capiz. Uy, si Ruben again. Watching from Capiz. Watching from Capiz times 2. Hello, Ruben. Good evening. Watching from Cavite. Sean Asherto. Watching from Laguna. John Barry de la Cruz. Hey, good evening, everyone. Pagandahan to ng picture na nakikita kong nagro-roll in. Ang dating sa akin parang hello from every single province in the Philippines. Hello, good evening, everyone. Okay, okay. I think we've exhausted all the time we have Mikael for the questions we spoke about on the outline. And I think that shows us just how fantastic the discussion is. Kasi ang daming natututunan, ang daming diskusyon, ang daming summaries. Also, bida-bida din ako with my own questions. At some point, we also need to take in questions from the audience. Sige, I think may isa nang pumasok dito. Here you go. This is one from our audience member, from Angelo Santiago. What's the hardest topic or material that you've had to communicate? Ganda?
Odd?
Communication.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this might sound odd, pero about vaccines. Kasi takot ako na, mapasama pa yung pagpapaliwanag ko kaysa makatulong. Like I said, hindi ako expert dito, and everything I know about vaccines and how they work, especially yung COVID vaccine, which was at the time, ang daming tanong ng mga tao, is based on what the experts I've talked to have told me and what I've read online. So parang yung confidence ko rin medyo hindi gano'n kataas dahil din ako takot din ako sa COVID nung mga panahon yun. I didn't want my family members to get it. I was praying for a vaccine to be developed and fortunately built on existing research to answer kung bakit daw ang bilis ng vaccine because it was based on long story short, it was based on existing data taken from a similar virus yung from years ago. So parang kaya nagkaroon na ng parang building blocks yung vaccine. Kaya siya quote unquote mabilis. In fact, ano lang siya, normal lang yung I would say na reasonable yung timeline for developing it. Pero yun, it was the most difficult thing for me to communicate, not really because there wasn't much information. Like parang I can work with very little. Yung Manila Spaniel nga talagang umabot pa ako sa nagbasa ako ng dyaryo ng Australia para ma-verify yung mga bagay-bagay. Wala akong problema doon. Pero yung when lives are at stake, parang ako,
Oh,
whoa,
yeah.
whoa, can I really do this? Am I gonna add something positive to this discussion or gugulo lang ba? So parang yun, that was the toughest. Anything related to public health, but specifically vaccines.
All right. Thank you, Mikael. Ayan, ang bilis ng pasok ng tanong ah. On a different but related topic, is Ask Theory still accepting volunteers for podcast transcriptionism?
Oh
Potential
yes. Oh yes,
employee.
please. I cannot do it alone. Yes, please. If you're interested, later I'll flash the email of Flip Science. So please send us an email there if you're interested. Thank you so much.
O, alam nyo na gagawin. Message lang kayo kay Mikael if you want a job opening. There you go. Because again, we highlight the issue of collaboration, not really an issue, but an important ingredient in trying to communicate science successfully. Okay, this particular question is actually connected to another question na nasa script natin. I'll read the question that's on the script and then I'll segue to this one from the audience. So here you go. What are the tips for communicating science clearly? And any tips for young people that need to communicate with older people? Kasi baka na-downplay lang, di ba? Kasi bata. There's ageism involved here.
Okay. Ang masasabi ko dyan, and this might sound simplistic, but it's really the formula. I don't know. You speak with competence and confidence. Competence as in, i-research nyo ng mabuti yung facts and clear yung message. Hindi naman sobrang simplified, pero very clear yung pag-deliver nyo. Remember that if you're speaking to an older audience, yung approach that you would normally take for people your age might not work for them. So I would suggest tingin-tingin kayo ng mga ibang content, whether it's videos or articles that are geared towards an older audience and sort of base your content creation on that. But also speak with confidence. Huwag kayong masindak na, I'm young. So therefore, people will not take me seriously. The other way around. People will take me seriously because I am young and I have done my research. I represent the hope of the future and I am going to give them that hope by giving them quality science content. Yan. So, yan. Ipasok na rin natin yung tips for effective science communication. I have about 7. Uh,
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So the first one is don't be afraid to experiment. So yung trivia yung format ng trivia namin sa Ask Theory, ito very superficial lang. We experimented with different pictures. They're not displaying weird, pero basically this is the current look of the flip facts. Pero before yung hindi lumabas yung pictures dito, we had different formats and we were testing yung audience reaction. Yung kanina nakita niyo yung kay Dr. Lantican, yun yung dating format ng flip facts. So ngayon yung flip facts medyo ganito na blue and ano na. And that's going to change pa because it's a yan, there you go. So nung una kong ginawa yung flip facts, I tried to correspond to the calendar day. Parang January 1, significant science discovery. But I quickly got burned out kasi parang uh, I mean, if you try hard enough, you'll find a significant science event for every day of the year. It's possible. But not everything is going to be relevant or particularly interesting to the Filipino audience. So, kailangan ko pang balansehin yun. So, minsan may mga trivia kami na parang isa lang o dalawa lang yung nag-react. So, parang naisip ko, syempre may konting, ay, wala masyado nakapansin. But at the same time, nakakatulong ba talaga to? So next, ni-reformat namin. Iniba ko ng konti yung format, pero medyo date-based pa rin siya, pero mas maiksi na yung caption. This worked a little better, but not quite like how I wanted it to. And then ito, yung pangatlong format, which was our most successful format, yung format din nung nakita yung kanina, yung kay Dr. Lantican, yung ganyang format na simple card, and then yung Facebook description is the caption for the explanation. And then same principle for this new format, na iba lang yung kulay kasi yung mas branding na ng Flip Science, yung this shade of blue. And this will probably evolve pa. Right now, medyo we're on break yung sa trivia, but we're planning to bring it back to a more regular schedule. Syempre, nag-iipon kami ng trivia. Pero we might debut a new format, so just wait, just watch out for it on the Flip Science web page, Facebook page. Okay, then tip number 2 is identify what your audience values most. Ito, pinaliwanag ko na kanina to, yung bakit kailangan natin ng space science sa Pilipinas. And as you can tell from my case study, it worked. Basically, just answer the question, who is my audience and how is this relevant to them? Ano ba yung so what? What's the so what that I have to answer? And then make sure you understand what you're writing about. Ito, I use the word cancer killer in the headline with much anxiety. Kasi ako parang, this is a bold claim. Cancer killer. Pero clarify naman sa article what this means. It doesn't mean it cures all cancer. It literally means that this compound that they found, that the Filipino scientists found in snail bacteria, was able to kill cancer in a laboratory setting. So nandun naman yun sa article. So sabi ko, would it be an exaggeration if I use the word cancer killer in the headline to get attention? Sabi naman nung scientist, hindi. And then, like I said, open naman kami sa feedback. Wala namang nag-complain. Looks like they read the article and understood what that means. So, it was good. But at the same time, when I wrote about this, I had to understand yung ano ba yung what was this compound? What was this substance? Etc. etc. And you'll see that if you read this article, medyo technical siya, but also I went to great pains to try to explain it in a simpler way. So, you can't write about something you don't understand because mahalata nilang hindi mo naiintindihan yung sinusulat mo. So, make sure you understand what you're writing about. Timing is key. Ito yung I remember that we published this nung day na may nag-viral na video of that ostrich running on the street. So parang naisip ko, parang funny siguro kung yung trivia natin sa araw na to tungkol sa ostrich. So yan, a single kick from an ostrich is powerful enough. It's enough to kill a human being. But don't expect virality, popularity, or recognition for your efforts. As I shared kanina, you know the story kanina, sometimes it works out in unexpected ways, sometimes it doesn't, and that's fine. As long as you did your best and you make sure that you're putting out quality content, secondary or tertiary or whatever na lang tong mga ibang bagay ito. Ang primary objective mo dapat ay makapag-share ng science sa malinaw na paraan. Credit your sources properly. Para pag nakita ng photographer na hiniraman mo ng photo, hindi siya magalit sa'yo. Kidding aside, tingnan nyo to. I used the photo by Mr. Robin Losnak, and I don't know this guy. I've never spoken to this guy, but he was happy enough to even share this on his own profile. So parang nagulat nga ako, nakaabot sa kanya to, but well, it happened. So you credit your sources properly because you want to give respect then to your sources of information. And also, if people want to double check, totoo nga ba yung sinasabi mo? Credible nga ba yung sinasabi mo? Baka naman inimbento mo lang yan. Ay, hindi. Ito yung references ko. You can even talk to them yourself. Or you can even look at the books yourself. And of course, prepare to be questioned, doubted, belittled, and even insulted. So whether you're talking about how 5G technology has nothing to do with COVID-19, or if you talk about debunking Filipino inventor myths and you get called racist and hateful and revising history, and I don't know, this person was really offended by my article. I don't know why, but whatever. So sabi niya, ayaw na niya sa Flip Science, visit daw. Okay, sige. So but you prepare yourself for these kinds of comments. Masabihan ka na pupunta kang impyerno, masabihan ka na bayaran ka ng Big Pharma. These are, tatalbog lang yan sa'yo. The important thing is you're doing what you can with your abilities and your resources to so hopefully make the country a better place. And at the end of it all, that's really all that matters. Yeah.
That particular question struck me again. The one that says, "How do you communicate science as a young person towards an older person?" Like it really struck me confidence and competence as well. Because in my head, which other age demographic would those two words apply? Then you realize it applies to every age demographic you can think of. It's just that the most pronounced belittling and doubting and insulting comes from the older generation towards the younger ones. And that last one really struck me. The words questioned, doubted, belittled, insulted. On the one hand, it tells us how not so ideal the Philippines is now, considering the age of disinformation, misinformation, and even malinformation. The culture is so entrenched. That's what we're trying to say here. But and then you realize that when you say prepare to be questioned, doubted, belittled, and even insulted, I wanted to highlight the fact how brave, courageous, and just downright cool science communicators are. I mean, everything you're doing is based on your own passion, on things that built out of your own pocket. Tapos gaganituhin kayo. Like, para saan pa yung magandang ginawa nyo kung gaganituhin kayo? But then you mentioned you have to be prepared for it because that's the price we have to pay. Kasi nga, kailangan yung science communicator ang mag-a-adjust. Because there is a world out there that yeah needs to be educated, but the education has to be packaged so well, so accessibly well that for some reason people would actually be moved, be persuaded to think and behave the way you intend them to do based on what you wrote in your science communication script. I love talking I love talking to people like you. Ang daling i-summarize ng insights mo because they're so packaged well, 'di ba? Like in my head, pagpasok ko sa klase bukas, ito, according to Mikael Francisco of Flipscience.ph, napakahusay magsulat, things like that. Speaking of our audience, basa daw tayo ng comments from our live viewers here. Sige, hanap tayo ng comments na pwede nating basahin. Reynaldo Hansinal Marin Jr., watching from Davao de Oro. Hello, Reynaldo. And then, do we have other comments from the audience? Alexis Verlu Caspe. Oh, we have a question here. How do you deal with topics science still cannot answer yet? Wow. Miss Universe. Okay.
Ah, well, ayun nga, like I said, unang-una, you don't make fantastic claims. You don't, because for some people, ito yung misconception about science eh. For some people, science is absolute truth. Yun yung the way they portray science. The science is irrefutable fact. That's wrong. Because for a lot of things that we believe or that evidence supports is sound science now, they were not sound science a century ago and were totally different 2 centuries ago. Science is making in siguro in my own words, it's basing your decisions and making reasonable, educated, intelligent guesses and conclusions based on the most convincing and verifiable evidence available on hand. That's why there's a Twitter account na parang ang ano niya, there's a Twitter account that looks for science articles shared on Twitter, yung mga research, yung mga tipong cancer, new compound found to cure cancer. Pero pag binasa mo yung article, sa daga pala kasi nasa laboratory setting. So, dinadagdagan niya ng in mice. So, i-retweet niya sa lagay niya in mice. Yun na yung ginagawa nung Twitter article. But my point is, you present the most reasonable answer that can be supported by facts, but you also clarify na hindi ito 100% certain. Like, if you have to say that more research is required, you say that more research is required. You don't say na, ito yung sinabi ng isang study na na-publish ng 2020 and ito na yun. Hindi ganun yun. You have to be clear na ito yung research, ito yung, if you can state yung gaano kalaki yung sample size ng research, ito rin, kung sa daga ba ito ginawa, ganyan. And yun lang, you don't seek to be the be all and all authority when it comes to facts. You just want to share these credible evidence, these verifiable pieces of evidence with people so that they can uh, be better informed. Yun dapat yung goal. And if there are questions that science still cannot answer, that only means we have to keep asking.
Yeah, I just thought of the one thing my science professor taught me back in college. The marker of a good researcher is someone who accepts the fact that he or she doesn't know everything in this world, and that research, by nature, is subject to change, and therefore more research has to be done. The only constant thing in this world is change, and research has to catch up to it. And everything that you mentioned is just the perfect way to end this fantastic discussion we have, and also fantastic plugging of Flipscience.ph as well. Okay, I have a directive to read the shout outs. Again, we have Sean Nathan Asherto. Hi, Sir Mikael. I have good news for you. I had and still keeping the spark of science inside me. Oh, you have a fan, Mikael. I love it.
I know Sean, and
So,
I
Sean,
just want to say that I'm very very happy to hear that.
did you teach him at some point? Yeah.
I didn't teach him, but he found some of my content valuable. That's what
All
I'll
right.
say. And I'm very happy that I was able to contribute in some way.
All right. We have another comment from Joshua P. Torres. I am a big fan of Flip Science. Keep it up, Mikael. This SciComm platform competes at the same level as any other leading international science media outfits out there. Hmm. Ayun na nga. The affirmation.
Thank you.
Can,
Thank you po. But
can,
I just want to say that this is only possible because I talk to so many brilliant people. I want to thank you for saying at the start of this webinar that I was smart. I think that my biggest strength as a science communicator is that I don't think I'm smart. I think that there's a lot of things, a lot of empty space. Siyempre, hindi naman ganun ng, I mean, we obviously know that's not how we measure intelligence, but I'm in a figurative way. There's a lot of empty space in my head that I am able to fill because there are so many generous Filipino scientists and experts who are willing to give their time for me. So, yung content ng Flip Science would not be possible without the brilliant Filipino minds who serve as our sources of information. So, thank you. We are successful because you are there.
I would like to reinforce what Mikael just said earlier. The Philippines has an abundance of brilliant people in this country. You just need to know how to access them. And as a member of the academe, the good ones, the good members of the academe are those who are generous in sharing their information. Part of that information are their contact details. So when they're accessible, you know they're good people. Brilliant na nga, generous pa. Okay? Dapat yung email address nila, dapat available yan online.
Oh yeah,
Just saying.
sorry.
Go, Mikael.
If, yeah, if you listen to the Ask Theory podcast and if you feel like you're interested to talk to the scientists that we featured, kasi we have like about 90 episodes now, each featuring a different
Oh,
scientist. Yung contact information nila nandun sa show notes. So if you ever want to send them an email or whatever, I invite you guys to do so or reach out to them on social media. You'll find their contact information there. Yun din yung isang goal ng Ask Theory, to sort of like serve as a soft catalog of
mhm.
Filipino science experts in different fields. So if you need to talk to a microbiologist, you can email this person. Parang ganun.
There you go. Like, researchers, scientists can be notoriously inaccessible to people. So Ask Theory is a perfect platform to connect you to such people there. And it's better to talk to the experts than just listening to whatever you can find online. Talk to the experts. They're the closest thing to that truth or fact that you're trying to research about. All right, I'll read a little bit more shout outs here. Ruben John A. Abalayan. Kanina pa to, I love it. Watching from Philomer Christian University, Rojas City, Capiz. Annalisa Nicodemos, great day. Great day to you too, although gabi na. John Barry de la Cruz, hello, greetings, shout out to students of BS Physics of PUP, and hello to all. Hello, John Barry. Alexis Verlu, Sinamok, hello, UMTC and DOST JLSS 2021 scholars from Region 11. Hey! Dito ang mga DOST scholars natin. Good evening, everyone. Okay, so that's it for our Q&A session. Thank you for all of the questions there. All of them were interesting. All of them sparked very insightful discussions from our speaker. And also among you viewers, maybe you're doing your own discussions on your own. And I don't know, just enjoying whatever Mikael has to offer. Um, Actually, Mikael, there's one last question we have here, just to smoothly close off the discussion. We go back to some of the objectives of Saliksik, which are to promote the importance of research and inspire our fellow Filipinos to engage themselves in research. What would be your advice for budding researchers in the Philippines?
Oh, wow. I'll just want to say na this advice comes from the almost 100 scientists that I've talked to. It's not my own advice because I'm not a researcher, but I've listened to enough researchers to know. Unang-una, ito practical piece of advice, save money. I think this is my favorite piece of advice from a researcher. Kasi daw, science is rewarding, but science in the Philippines can also be expensive. And not just in terms of getting a degree, ganyan, because there are scholarships for that. Yeah, sorry, that's another tip. If you want to pursue, to take your education to the next level, your science education to the next level, you look for scholarship opportunities. For example, DOST, and daming opportunities yan. There are independent organizations who are also offering science scholarships. So, hanapin nyo lang yung yung mga opportunities na yan, and you can make your graduate studies dreams come true. Pero yun, unang-una, save money, because the reality of the situation here in the Philippines is sometimes you will have to shell out your own money for materials, for equipment. Siyempre, reimburse naman, pero wala, it is what it is. So if you really feel strongly about research, save money. Pangalawa, never stop asking questions. Nabanggit mo nga kanina na yung researcher, pag in-acknowledge niya yung limitations niya na hindi niya alam ang lahat ng bagay sa mundo, that's how he can be like a really good, or she, or they can be a really good researcher. Kailangan alam natin na may mga bagay na hindi natin alam. Yun. Pangatlo, don't do science for the accolades or the money or something, because if your motivation is paper thin, or if your motivation is tied to ego, which I would say is the greatest enemy of not just a researcher but also a science communicator. If those are the things that are keeping you in the scientific field, you won't be in the scientific field for long. So it really has to come from a genuine love for science. And last but not least, make friends. Coming from an introvert, make friends within the research community. You will be surprised not only to find like minded individuals in your field, but also individuals in other disciplines who you can collaborate with to produce wonderful results.
Thank you. May comment tayo. Make friends with us.
Make friends with Saliksik.
With
Yan.
us, with Saliksik, with Flip Science, with
With Flip
ASPI.
Science.
Gusto ko yung parang may networking na nagaganap, which I
Ah,
think is one of the reasons why this webinar is being done anyway. All right. Thank you, Mikael. Um, while you are at it, do you have anything to promote to our live
yes.
audience? Go ahead, go
Thank
ahead.
you. Let me just pull up the correct slide. Yan. Okay. Um, Right. I just want to share that if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, violent reactions, sige, pwede na rin. You can email me at flipscience.ph@gmail.com or michaelwrites@gmail.com. I sincerely apologize if I don't get to respond to you immediately. I am busy, and I also sometimes have email anxiety. Sometimes pag ang dami nag-email, I kind of tend to, it's part of being, I guess, a little bit too much on the introvert side. But rest assured I will respond. You can also follow us on social media. We have Facebook, we have Twitter at Flipscience.ph, Instagram at FlipFactsDaily. Please tune in to the Ask Theory podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and other podcast platforms. And also, sabi ko nga, oo nga pala, may mga libro nga pala kami. Um, if you want to learn more about the stories of Filipino scientists, we I invite you to get a copy of Historiang Científico, a showcase of Filipino scientific excellence. And if you're interested in scientific trivia, or if you're looking for a great gift for younger readers who might be interested in science, yung mga tipong grade school or high school who are really trying to get into it, or if you just want to learn more about the world around you, please get a copy of Science Scramble. You can buy both books on Shopee. The link is shopee.ph/flipscience. Tamang-tama, 99 bukas. I-add to cart na yan. And yun, that's it. Thank you very much for not falling asleep, I
Oh, come
guess.
on. Maraming salamat, Mikael, sa pagpapaunlak sa imbitasyon namin. Thank you so much for giving us your time and your insights with us. And yes, I may be reading from the script, but I do mean it because personally, I learned a lot from you. Like, you know, for sure, I'm going to incorporate your materials to my classes because I'm teaching English 13 writing as thinking with my kids, and I have a block of science majors here. And I'm so excited to share with them Flipscience.ph. O, meron na kayong mentor. At na-meet ko
Thank
siya.
you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm just gonna do a little bit of plugging here for our live audience. To everyone still watching, thank you for staying until the very end. Salamat sa mga shoutouts ninyo. Tuwang-tuwa kami sa pagbabasa. Please fill out our evaluation form so that we can deliver better quality content. The link should be flashed on the screen or in the rolling credits that you have there, perhaps in the comment section as well. In addition to that one, if you need certificates, just please drop us a message on Saliksik Facebook. Okay? Kasi alam ko medyo may kahiligan ng mga bata sa certificate. So just drop us a request. All right? In addition to that one, we would also like to plug another separate project that we have here. Saliksik is proud to present the AutoBest Regional Research Database, a partnership with DOST Region 10 and Auto Chamber of Commerce and Industry Foundation, Inc. The database specifically targets innovators from Region 10 and connects research projects with potential LGU, NGO, and industry adopters that need your innovation. Just submit your research proposal and Saliksik will do the rest. For more details and updates on this innovation activation campaign, follow Saliksik on Facebook and LinkedIn. Also, I have paalam from my director. I also have my own passion project outside of Saliksik. For my fellow Hallyu K-pop enthusiasts out there, hello. I'd like to plug Hallyu Wednesdays. It is a mental health initiative of Project Study Asia. Our platform aims to spread mental wellness and emotional literacy packaged to the K-Wave fandom. We do give psychological first aid training, which is badly needed during the pandemic. We package it through the K-Wave fandom. We hold Hallyu-inspired decompression sessions every Wednesday. We started with BTS, and we're now expanding to integrate N-Hypen and also 17. Hello, Engines, Army, and Carats. Balik tayo sa Saliksik. If you missed any of our events, you can always visit our page to watch or rewatch our webinars. Remember to like, share, and follow our Facebook page for similar events and research-related information. Please, again, answer our survey. The feedback that we get from you is what will definitely help us improve. It's been a long time since we last did this, so the feedback will really help us para mas maraming ganitong webinars at makipagtsikahan tayo sa ating mga science communicators and other researchers in the Philippines. See you all soon in our next Saliksikat webinar. Good evening, everyone. Sana masarap ang dinner ninyo. Goodbye!